Started. So welcome to everyone who's joined us for this session. We're on day 3 of our event, and it's awesome to have you all with us, where we're going to be talking about how, in this case, Christian, our awesome guest speaker, teaches people about the law and their rights, crucially in just 60-second videos. So this session will be recorded, so if you do have to drop off, as normal, we will send the recording out later today, and if you want to revisit any of this discussion, then you can pick it up in the recording as well. This is going to be a half-hour session, but we're going to leave sort of 10 minutes-ish at the end for Q&A. So as normal, if you use the question box on your GoToWebinar platform, you can put the questions in there and we will come to them at the end. So with that, let's do some proper introductions. So as you're probably familiar with me by now if you've been on a couple of these sessions, but I'm the content marketing manager here at Sparkle, and I will be your host for today's session. And I am really excited to be joined by Christian, who is a barrister by day and a content creator by night, creating awesome content about how people can better understand the law and how it affects them. And off the back of that, he created a YouTube channel called The Law in 60 Seconds. But I know Christian will probably do a better introduction of himself and has more to say. So I guess to kick us off, could you kind of just tell us a bit more about the law in 60 seconds, how it got started, and a bit more about you?
Of course, and thank you for having me, Naomi. So I think to start, the law in 60 seconds, it's a series on YouTube where the law is explained in 60 seconds. And the real catalyst for it was a realization that whilst people often understood the importance of the law, they often thought it was too complex or too time-consuming to learn about. So I thought if you can create a 60-second video, that knocks out the time-consuming element. And if it's explained in really basic language, it can't be seen as too complicated. So that was the real reason it started. And at first it was just a tripod that I bought from Amazon and my face, and I just speak into the camera. And over time it's evolved into the animations. And I think there was quite a personal reason as well. And I remember at the time that I started the videos, I was living in London. This was the year 2018, and stop and search was a really big issue. And it was disproportionately affecting people from my community. And I wanted to create a video that effectively I could show to a friend or my younger cousin about your rights if you are stopped and searched. So loads of different factors were at play, but that's what led to the first video that was, of course, about stop and search. And the end mission is to kind of arm everybody about their legal rights.
Perfect. I think that's an awesome goal to have, and it's so important, like you said, that all of us understand exactly what laws affect us. So to give you a better idea of the kind of videos Christian creates, we thought we'd just share one with you now. So I'll switch to that.
Welcome to the Law in 60 Seconds. My name is Christian Weaver. Since the 14th of September, other than in certain circumstances, indoor and outdoor social gatherings of more than 6 people have been banned in England. So what can the police do if you're in a group of more than 6 people? And what police powers exist when it comes to the wearing of face coverings too? If you're in a group of more than 6, the police can ask you to disperse. If you don't disperse, you can be fined £200, reduced to £100 if paid within 14 days. The amount you are fined doubles with each repeat offence, and after the first offence, there will be no discount. So, for example, receiving a second fine will amount to £400, and a third fine will be £800, right up to a maximum value of £6,400. Additionally, organisers of illegal gatherings of more than 30, such as those organising house parties, can face a £10,000 fine. As for face coverings, they are now mandatory in a number of places, including shops, supermarkets, and on public transport, unless you're exempt. The fine regime is the same as that applying to gatherings of more than 6, meaning you can be fined £200 for the first offence and further fined for repeat offences up to a maximum value of £6,400. If you pay the fine, you won't be liable to conviction.
So hopefully that gave you a good idea of the sort of things Christian's creating. Obviously, that's a COVID example there. But I wanted to kind of say, Christian, what do you think are the advantages of video for learning, both from a educator and a student perspective? What do you think the key benefits are?
Sure. So I think starting with the student learner perspective and using law as an example, law despite what I might try and tell myself, isn't exactly a sexy topic. And therefore it requires an element of motivation for someone to actually want to look into law and start reading up on the law. And I think you can apply that more widely. Learning generally requires somebody to need to find a bit of motivation to actually put themselves in the space to learn. So for example, if you imagine listening to a lecturer, but watching an animated video is so much easier. You don't really need that much motivation to bring yourself to watch an animated video with bright imagery and things like that. And I think that's quite important for the learning process, because you actually enter the learning process with less resistance. You want to be there, you know, it's just an animated video. And I think therefore you actually absorb so much more of the content. I think in addition, animations actually can appear fun. So I can see the clip showing now is in relation to the COVID regulations, and if you have a party, how you could potentially receive a £10,000 fine. Now, if you were just reading that in this statute, it looks extremely boring. But actually seeing it like that, hopefully can make someone maybe chuckle a bit, and it actually makes it stick in their mind that bit more as well. And I think when you maybe deep the significance of that, that's somebody actually enjoying the process of absorbing information that relates to the law, which is something quite hard to do ordinarily. And I think in terms of, but in fact, still on the student learner point, I think it actually aids different learning styles as well. So I know for me, when I started off as a trainee barrister, I often had a fear that if someone just told me information, I wouldn't be able to retain it. It's a weakness I've always had. It's kind of gotten better now, but what's brilliant about animation is that you can have the audio, but also the video as well. And again, that can really help things stick in a person's mind, especially when the information is important information. And then I think in terms of the educator perspective, I think it fits into a busy lifestyle, these animations. So you could have your laptop out and you could be at home with your wife and your children, present in the room, and you could just be animating away, creating a video. So you can still be present in the home at the same time. I think in addition, you can be doing this at times when there's dead time. So I know for me, I'm often in courts in far-flung places in the country, like Blackpool and Burnley. And what I often find is that on the journey home, I can just be making a video, and it's just a brilliant way to utilize a 3-hour journey. And I think you can also make it work around you. So I remember when I was doing the videos and it would just be my face, and I'd have to think about things like, have I had a haircut? Is the lighting good here? Is there background noise? I'd sometimes be 59 seconds into a video and then a truck would go past and you just have to start again. I think when you're using animation, it's just so much easier, and you can control those external factors that bit much more. And I think finally, you can really tailor things to your audience when you have an animated video as well. So what you say can be the same, but if you know that your class is a class that are particularly young or have certain interests, you can use imagery that represents that, so that they personally find benefit and are able to absorb the information you're trying to say. So that's probably quite a long-winded answer, but I think that's the benefits for a student and an educator.
No, I think those are all super important things, and even just in that sort of snippet of information, it's clear there are just so many different benefits. I think everyone who's joined today, regardless of what you do, I'm sure you are strapped for time just because life is busy. So yeah, being able to fit around all your other responsibilities is definitely a benefit. And we've kind of started to touch on why you moved away from the talking head style to animation. Are there any other reasons beyond obviously like the logistics, like you said, and yeah, the external factors that you can't control that kind of made you move towards animation?
Sure, I think the external factors were a big part, but actually for certain videos, it just worked better as well. So for example, the protest video, which was I think the first one I did, which was an animated video, I was appreciating that people might be watching that when they're actually in a protest, and therefore, no matter how good your lip reading skills are, you might just struggle to hear things. Whereas when there's an animation that goes alongside it, it aids your understanding. And I felt like it almost made perfect sense to use an animation there. But I think in addition, you have greater control of how your video is perceived. So particularly on serious topics, the way the world is in social media, people will always want to find a way to criticize what you've done. So it might be the fact that you're talking about a really serious topic, and for whatever reason, you're smiling a little bit when you're speaking of that topic. And I think what animations allow you to do is just control exactly what's going out. There could even be a book on your bookshelf that someone draws an issue with when you're doing it by face, but you can really control what goes out when you do it in animation. And I think perhaps the final point on that, maybe a bit deeper as well, but it's the fact that I didn't like the fact that, or in fact, if I take a back step, I personally believe it's really important that the everyday person is armed with their knowledge of their legal rights. And I found it just ethically problematic that the fact that it might be noisy outside or not a sunny day or I hadn't had a haircut meant that I couldn't get really important information out to people that I felt they needed to know. So my laptop always works. It's going to break tomorrow now, I can tell. But generally speaking, I've never had problems with my laptop. I can always produce videos no matter what external factors exist. And that therefore means I can always carry out my mission, for want of a better word, of helping people be informed of their rights. Yeah.
Nice. So yeah, it's like that consistency and that regularity that you can really nail the viewing experience if there's none of those external distractions, like you said. So yeah, definitely can see that. And obviously in this case, we're talking about law, but I think this applies to any sort of really meaty subject that is a little bit denser and hard to get into. How do you start kind of breaking it down into chunks to start communicating on these topics?
Sure. So I've almost developed a system now that I use, which works well for me. So firstly, I'll identify what's the topical issue, and then I'll be, through the course of my everyday life, I'll be jotting down what I think are topical issues. And then I'll choose an issue. Let's say it's the COVID regulations and the fact that people are unsure about them. And then I'll spend maybe a few hours on the internet looking at opinion blogs. I'll look at legal textbooks, and I'll just copy and paste everything into a document. So I personally use Evernote, which works well for me, but there's so many do the same thing. But then once I've done that, I'll look at all of the information, print it off. I'll then group similar things with each other, then print it off again. And then from there, I'll start to identify, right, what is the key information here? What do people actually need to know? What would the person that knows nothing of the law find particularly important? And then from there, I go through quite a harsh process of just deleting a lot of information. And then once I think I've got something that's around 60 seconds, I literally just read it out loud, not even recording it, just read it out loud with a stopwatch next to me and just see if it's roughly around 60 seconds. And over time, you get better at guessing where the 60-second mark is going to lie. But even to start with, I feel like even now on my Mac, I could say, hey Siri, open a stopwatch. It's so easy to start that timing process. And from there, yes, as long as it's between about 57 and 63 seconds, I know that by the speed in which I speak and things like that, I'll be able to get it around that 60-second mark. So that's how I start breaking it down.
So it's almost like a sort of huge funnel that you're just taking things in at the top and gradually refining it down to that
Yes.
perfect sweet spot. And I think it's really interesting that you highlight looking at what's topical, because if you want your videos, obviously as you do, to be picked up maybe by the media, but particularly by like people talking about them, then tapping into those topics that are really hot at the moment is a really important point. Is something that's easy to overlook if you're just sort of so into your own topic and you just want to share what you're passionate about. So I think flagging that is really interesting.
And I think just on that, actually, so that's such an interesting point. I think particularly when you're doing videos that aren't necessarily the most sexy of topics, tapping into the interest someone might already have is a perfect way to maybe get that initial interest. So completely agree.
Definitely. So we've kind of started getting into how you plan to fit into the 60 seconds, but do you have any more advice, I guess, on refining the content down and kind of polishing it before you head into the animation?
Yeah, so often when I've gotten to the point where I've kind of figured out which paragraphs I want to be in, based on the resources I've already been to, so the legal blogs, the legal textbooks, it's often in legalese, legal jargon. So the next process is making it more basic, and that's actually helpfully a key way of getting the information to an even lesser time span, because you can cut out the long words and just say quite simply what you're trying to say. And yeah, I would say that really is in getting it under the 60 seconds. But I think in addition is the great thing about doing it through digitally, if you like, so recording your audio digitally, is that you can actually start manipulating it a bit as well. So I might speak quicker, or actually when I've downloaded the audio onto my laptop, I can put the speed at perhaps 1.2. And there's just little things you can start doing like that that helps ensure that it fits into 60 seconds. And funnily enough, in relation to COVID, I mean, COVID is something that is killing people. So there were times when I thought, no, actually, I don't want to limit this to just 60 seconds. So what I would do there is the main content will be 60 seconds, but then at the end, maybe as I'm doing my end credits, there might be a little thing in the corner that says, remember, if you are feeling particularly low, you can contact the Samaritans, just important information like that. So I think as you go through the process more, you find ways to manipulate your videos so that as much information is in there as possible.
Nice. So you can kind of still make it work for you, even with the constraints of maybe time or whatever style you're using video.
Yeah.
So once you start kind of plotting this out into an animation, I know some of the things you're talking about obviously aren't things that immediately an image springs to mind. So how do you visualize more intangible concepts?
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, I draft the script without any thought of what the animations could be. And I think that's really important because that allows me to tap into the deepest space of what is just easy for people to understand. I think the moment I try and start compromising that headspace but what animations exist on VideoScribe makes things harder. So I take the pressure off myself by doing that to start with. And then I think from there, I've developed a mindset that there is always something that will show what you want. So I remember in the protest rights video, and I was saying how you can walk away from a police officer if they ask you a question and you're not detained or anything like that. And perhaps due to my lack of knowledge at VideoScribe at the time, I didn't know how to show the officer walking off. So all I did was added 2 arrows to the image of the police officer, which depicted that he was now walking off. And it was kind of having an open mind like that enabled me to visualize concepts that might be a bit harder ordinarily. So, and I think the final thing I'll say on that as well is that I realized that not everything has to have an animation. So I can say what I'm saying with the audio, and the way I sort of see it is, provided the animation is supporting the audio, it doesn't actually necessarily need to reflect the audio. The 2 work together. So I believe with all of those principles taken into account, you can always find a way to explain even the most tricky concepts using both audio but VideoScribe as well.
I like that, and I think for anyone listening who is newer to VideoScribe or creating videos, I think that's probably really reassuring that obviously like your information is the star of the show, so that shouldn't be compromised, and then the animations can really be flexed and sort of adapted to fit around what you're trying to say. So definitely great advice there. You mentioned at the start, obviously with your protest rights video, that you wanted people to be able to take in the information even if they are in the middle of a protest. So what other bits did you add just to make sure that the videos were accessible for everyone and potentially in any situation that they're watching?
Sure. So fortunately, animations in and of themselves go a long way in making sure that there is that bit of greater accessibility if someone is in that sort of environment. Something that I'm going to start doing is adding subtitles to all of my videos. So that is a way I'm going to ensure it's more accessible. So of course, the protest example is a good one. If someone was able to literally read what was at the bottom, that would have been brilliant. I think YouTube now kind of automatically allows subtitles to be added. So that's obviously good. But I think in addition, not using big words. So it's much easier to understand a simple word as opposed to understand a word you've probably heard twice in your life and therefore have to really think, well, did I hear that properly? And I think when you're trying to explain potentially complicated information, that little things like that are actually essential. And it also goes to the point we spoke a bit about earlier as well about topical issues. If people have already had in their mind thoughts about the issue you're speaking about, that in itself adds an element of accessibility because they're already warmed up to the issue you're talking about, the things you're probably going to be saying. And I think a prime example with that is the protest rights and laws regarding COVID restrictions. And I think just a final point on that is that animations allow you to categorize what you're talking about as well. So let's say someone fears they're about to be arrested and taken to a police station. You can quite obviously see when the police station part of what I'll be speaking about is being mentioned because there's a picture of a police station. So you know, okay, if I just get to that point, let me listen more intently from there, and then that will probably contain within it the information that I need to know. So yeah, I think they're the steps that I try and take in every single video now to make it as accessible as possible.
Perfect. And yeah, on the YouTube subtitles point, definitely you can do that. I think it automatically kind of takes in the voiceover that it finds, and then you can make any tweaks. So yeah, for anyone listening, that's definitely a great option. So we know a couple of your videos have been picked up quite publicly, but what feedback do you get on them? What's the response been?
Sure, generally really positive, which is really helpful for me. I remember at the start when I Stop and Search one that got picked up, and I think the feedback I got from that was a big factor in as to why Law in 60 Seconds still exists today, because not only were people saying it was helping them, but it gave me a window into how big a problem it actually is in society, this problem of people not knowing their legal rights. So the feedback's generally positive. And I mean, even things that I could never have envisaged have come about from the videos. So I've got a book coming out in September because a publisher and an agent got in touch. And they are all things that came about from these videos that were accessible. And I think often, I guess everyone in here, the reason you want to do an accessible video or use animation is because you want to touch a topic or explain a topic that probably isn't spoken about enough in society, that you feel passionate about, that maybe lacks an understanding. But as an extension of that point, when you do that, other people are going to think, wait, why is that not being done before? And I think that was how things like the book deal came about. People thought, well, actually, it's very true that people don't know their rights. Let's actually move this way from a video form into a book as well. So the feedback's been very positive, both from the public, but I think it's been fortunate that other industries have pursued it in that way as well, which has, of course, helped.
Definitely. I mean, congratulations again. That is an awesome result to have from these videos. And I think just shows for anyone watching what is possible. I mean, Christian in this case has started, like many VideoScribers, literally creating content that he's passionate about, and is blossomed into so many amazing opportunities. And I think that's just a really inspiring story for people thinking about their own journey with video. So thank you for sharing it with us. So to wrap up, the final question from us is, what would your #1 piece of advice be for anyone on the call today thinking or currently creating explainer videos to make them more effective or help get them out to a wider audience?
I think the #1 piece of advice would be to just start. I remember shopping around for which is the best animated video software and watching YouTube. Yeah, I chose VideoScribe, and then what was brilliant was that there were loads of YouTube tutorials about how you can use it. If I remember rightly, I think VideoScribe themselves had some which were very helpful, but then other just random accounts on YouTube had also done their own tutorials of how things can be done. And it's actually not that hard. When I'm the least artistic person. I was about to give you, no, I'm not. I'll just say that I'm the least artistic person you probably ever meet. And I really thought I would struggle using something like this, but it's so easy. I think these sorts of software are made with the person in mind. So I think start, use the animated videos. And I think the one thing I would say is give yourself perhaps a clear day to actually do it. So I think when you're trying to do it under time pressure, it makes it that bit harder because there are fiddly bits that you'll need to get used to. But I think when you remove the time pressure and actually get into a space where you can enjoy the process, and that comes sooner than you might think, because when there's something you're passionate about, you're trying to explain, and maybe you're 20 seconds in and you're playing back the animations you have created, and you're thinking, wow, that just better articulates than I ever could this issue. It actually gets quite motivating. So yes, just start, use the YouTube tutorials, and give yourself a clear day, and then I think you're set.
Perfect. All great pieces of advice. So thank you so much, Christian, for sharing bits of your journey and your story with us. I can see we've had a couple of comments coming in already, but if you do have any extra questions, then you can add them to the box now, so I'll start getting through them. So we've just had a couple of very nice comments that I'll pass on. So Asha has said that your video is wonderful and congratulations on doing a great thing. And the first question we have from Denise is, how did you get the countdown timer in the corner of your video? So quite a technical one to kick us off, but yeah, I guess something other people are interested in adding.
Sure. So YouTube tutorials, people used to say this to me, but there is a YouTube tutorial for everything. There is a girl in America that has created a YouTube tutorial on how you can do the exact thing. So for me, if I remember rightly, but I would suggest watching a tutorial. I went on my iPhone, I think I screen recorded the stopwatch on my iPhone, and then from there, you can use, I think it might have been the inbuilt software that comes, I think iMovie, in fact. I use iMovie, and then you can cut out the stopwatch, and from there drag it onto the video once it's completed. But it's not that hard. It's the sort of thing that, you know, if you have no clue what you're doing, it's impossible. But you watch a 5-minute YouTube tutorial and someone guides you through it. And I think they're really nice. I quite like that question, actually, because they're really nice touches to just give your video that extra almost selling factor to make it as useful for people as possible. And I think, I'm starting to ramble now, actually, but I think in particular on a legal video, it's particularly good because, as I say, law isn't necessarily the most interesting thing. But if you can see, okay, this whole thing's only 60 seconds and I'm already 30 seconds in, it actually encourages a person to stay for the full length of the video. And then after that 60 seconds, I've been able to keep them, but they actually are much more informed about their rights as well. So it's a win-win.
Perfect. We have had just some more comments saying thank you to Stephanie for letting us know. It's been great to hear Christian's story, and you've got lots more ideas for videos in the future, so that's awesome. So we've had a question from Tegan. Do you need to have a particular audience in mind when creating and filtering content?
That's a really good question. Yes, you do. And I've never thought about it so deliberately, but I think indirectly that always exists. So for example, with the protest rights video, that was at the height of the Black Lives Matter protests, and so many people that had never protested before. And bearing in mind we were in a pandemic, people were so passionate about the issue that they were just going to protest. So there, I wanted to almost explain the scariest sides of what can happen, i.e. when you are arrested, because I appreciated that so many people were being fueled by their raw emotion that they might not actually take the time to learn those things otherwise. But it's so important, you know, things such as, are you entitled to a solicitor for free? So yes, I do always have an audience in mind. But I think one thing that's been quite interesting as well is that we're all members of the public and we all have the same sorts of legal issues. There are a lot of legal issues, of course, but things such as my landlord won't give me my deposit back, maybe matters relating to bailiffs, maybe matters relating to a stop and search. They're things that everyday people just go through. So in a way, everyone's almost got a bit of an interest in that. So you don't have to be too specific as to how you target it, but instead just make the information as palatable as possible. And I found that normally does enough.
Perfect. I think we've just had a lot more comments saying how great your videos and presentation has been. So hats off to you, Christian. It has been very much enjoyed by the looks of it by everyone who's joined us. So I think with that, we will wrap up. We will answer any extra questions. I can see we've got a couple coming through offline.